I'm going to stop and introduce myself a little bit. And we'll have Allie on here. My name is Scott Lewis, and we've got welcome to Florida Climate Educators Network, and we're a group that's been around for about a year now. We think the teachers have a critical role in preparing our population to face a challenging future in the Sunshine State, helping Florida's children and adults become resilient in the face of climate change effects such as sea level rise, intensified heat, and coral reef destruction. We see prospects for Florida educators to participate in this enterprise by networking to share lessons and creative projects addressing climate change and its impacts in our state. We welcome you to join us and make contributions to this effort. So I'm going to do some work in a minute here. Let me see if I can find my screen here. You guys see me okay or not?
Yes, we can see you.
Okay, I want to make sure that I've got my screen on, that I've got my speaker screen on. And let's see, I'm not sure it's recording me, but that's okay. We'll get you on in here in a minute. And what I'm going to do is introduce Allie. Allie Dysart is a senior policy and program specialist at the Environmental Defense Fund, leading efforts to grow electric vehicle fleets and infrastructure across Florida. With a background in environmental advocacy, she collaborates with school districts, municipalities, and the private sector to advance EV adoption and secure funding under the Inflation Reduction Act and Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Aside from electric vehicles and infrastructure, Allie also has areas of expertise in organic agriculture, plastic and packaging waste, clean energy, and partnership engagement. With a passion for climate education and sustainability, Allie has worked across the public and private sectors, including roles in local government, educational institutions, and nonprofits. Allie has taught at the Museum of Flight, worked as a park ranger, and served as a science educator. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in Environmental Studies from the University of Washington, Seattle, and lives in St. Petersburg, where she enjoys outdoor activities and promoting sustainability. Allie, we're going to give you about 15 or 20 minutes or so, and then we'll have some Q&A and some brainstorming in about ways that our educators might want to think about using this in their own classroom. So I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, my laptop and my phone, they don't seem to use the video the same way. So I will be talking to you through my phone, and I'll be sharing my screen to show you guys the Florida Climate Futures mapping tool. So I will share my screen here. View it, slideshow mode. I think everybody can see this okay. So I'm with the Environmental Defense Fund. My name, title, and email is there in case anybody has any questions afterwards. Please feel free to reach out. We love working with local school districts and educators throughout the state of Florida. We work in a number of states. For those that are familiar with us, we are the Environmental Defense Fund. We've been around since 1967. We actually started during the Silent Springs era in the 1960s as a scrappy group of environmentalists that were noticing a change with birds and the different impacts that were going on back then with the aerosol cans and others. Since then, about 55 years, we've been an organization. We are now international. We're a global organization. We work in, I think, about 10 different countries. We have headquarters in DC and New York. We work very closely with federal government. We do not take funding from the private sector, but we do work very, very closely with the private sector. If you guys remember, Burger King used to give out Whoppers in styrofoam, and they no longer do that. That was an EDF. That was an EDF program that led that. Last year, we've now moved into some pretty cool stuff. And actually, I would love to come back on and talk about this later. We now have a methane tracking satellite that tracks orphan wells capturing methane release from orphan wells throughout the universe or the world. And the methane tracks that in real time. So that will actually be used for policy, for programming, for reaching out to the polluters and the emissions that are coming from those orphan wells. So I'm going to put this down so I can get to my screen over here. Sorry. Slideshow. Okay. All right, so the Florida team, we work in a number of different areas. Like he said, I work mainly on electric school bus fleets. I'm also a program manager, so I kind of oversee the rest of our team. The other areas that we work in are nature-based solutions, so mangroves, things like that to help with storms and flooding. And then we also work in renewable energy, bringing in, diversifying our portfolio of energy. You guys might be aware, but we are currently reliant as a fuel source, as an energy source, power source, 75, 76, 77% on imported natural gas as our power. Other states throughout the US are using hydropower, wind, solar, local natural gas. Florida is not doing that. We are importing 76%. So we're sending a lot of money outside. So these are the three topic areas that we mainly focus on for programming and policy in the state of Florida. So this time last year, we were working on Florida Climate Future Mapping Tool. This is the homepage. I'm going to reference this a lot, and I'll give you guys links and stuff so that you can access this on your own later. So I'm going to kind of walk us through this mapping tool and show you how it can be used as an education tool and resource. So the first one, you can see these are the three topic areas: energy insecurity, extreme heat, and storms and flooding. So we're going to first take a look at storms and flooding. Each of the different maps, this is the home page. So this is the home page for storms and flooding. All of the information was publicly sourced and it's cited throughout. You can click on it. You can kind of zoom in on some areas. Storms and flooding, as you can see here, we're talking about the risk based on where you live, what extreme rain events look like now and in the future, different costs that we've seen over the years as it's related to hurricanes and other extreme weather events. And then over here, you can see there are three other icons. When you're in the mapping tool, you can click on these three different icons and a larger map will show up. For ease, I just have them on the screen here, what the three different maps look like. So you can see this one, the larger one, is focused on global temperature rise based on different scenarios: 2 degrees Celsius increase in temperature, 4 degrees Celsius increase in temperature, and what that might look like as far as sea level rise. Then we have extreme rain events present 15 years, 30 years from now, and then average rainfall trends as they're growing over time and what we've seen in the past. So for storms and flooding, you would go to the main page that we just showed, which looks like this. You could click on these three different icons and those other maps will show up. Then while you're in here, you can go down here and you can see Susan and Doug's story. So this is kind of the layout for the whole mapping tool. It has the three different icons, a general map, some information, and then somebody's story. So for this story, we're listening to Susan and Doug. I'm not sure if you'll be able to hear this. Let's see, actually, if I put this on. I think because of the audio issues and technical issues, I won't be able to play the video. But basically, this is Doug and Susan, and they are talking about what it felt like, what it was like to live during extreme flooding event. This was from Ian. So there's a video here. It's about 30 seconds long, and it goes through, what they felt and what they were experiencing during Ian. It shows some of the flooding, some of the damage that was done to their house, etc. Oops. And I will go back. Back here, go to the next. Okay, so you would hit the back button and you would go back to Florida's climate future, the main page, and we'll go into the next one. So the next map area that we focused on is extreme heat. Again, you kind of have rising temperatures, different temperature scenarios, how many heat index days that we were seeing. You have a map here where it kind of shows what average temperatures looked like various times during July 2023. This map is from 2023. And then we have these icons again, the three different icons that look like this when you click into them: warming water temperatures, heat-related fatalities, and then what the risk of for wildfires. I know that California gets a lot of press events for wildfires, but Florida actually also experiences a rise in wildfires due to the impacts of man-made climate change. You would go back to this page, to the extreme heat page, and you would come down here, excuse me, and you would listen to Harold's story. You could watch the video, share that with your students. Harold is an ag worker in the middle of the state. And he talks about, what his experiences are like with extreme heat as, he works in the flower beds in the middle of our state as an agriculture worker. This is Harold. This is what he is chatting about. But again, it is a YouTube video that is, about 30 seconds long. This one actually is in Spanish with subtitles to be more inclusive and to have everybody's story told. Then you would hit the back button again, go back to the main page, and we'll now go into energy and security. So again, energy and security, you have the larger map. This one talks more about household impacts of our energy insecurity, who would be at greatest risk. Like I said before, we are importing all of the power that we use. We do not have a very diverse energy portfolio at this time. It is getting better. 20 years ago, we were mainly reliant on coal, and we were about maybe when Jeb Bush was in office, about 40% reliant on natural gas, and now we're up to 76. So it can fluctuate based on the industry. And so we do know that the portfolio that we're using for energy can change over time if we're willing and we're making different policy decisions and infrastructure decisions and that kind of thing. So again, when you're in this energy and security main mapping page, you have risks, what the mix is, like I said, the 75%, annual energy costs, the volatility of natural gas and how it plays out on a global scale. And then you would click on these icons over here to pop them out. And it would look like this, although they would be individual. Energy burden by house type, anything where you spend more than 6% of your household annual income on your power bill means that you are living in an unaffordable energy burden. You are burdened with your energy and your power sector. This one over here is about residential's rising costs. It looks like Miami-Dade and Monroe counties are having the highest increase. They're at about 8%, or they will see 8% over the next 20-year time period. And then energy, increased energy use, who's using it, what we see kind of graphically, the trends for that one. You would go back to the main page and you'll come down here. You would see Priscilla's story. This is Priscilla. She is outside of Tampa, and she's talking about, what the higher utility costs mean to her and her family, and how she is personally feeling the burden. So we have these personal stories of people that are being impacted by climate change as it relates to the three different topic areas: energy and security, storms and flooding, and extreme heat. So now some ways that this map is being used across the state of Florida, and some educational activity ideas. Actually, I'll go 2 slides and show you the Ideas Museum, which I believe is outside of Miami or Fort Lauderdale. They've used this Florida Climate Futures, and because you can click on it, we do have the ability to have it on an iPad where students can click on it, watch the videos, kind of explore the whole thing. They're using it at their museum for a program with their high school students and summer mentors, summer interns, which are also high school students, to to create and design a Florida climate future city. What might a city look like? How do you climate proof a city? Talking about all the different ideas, oh, if we get solar panels, or if we have wind turbines on the tops of buildings, or if we have a green roof, what does that do for extreme heat? What does that do for diversifying our energy portfolio? How can we use different building materials to cool and insulate? So that's kind of a really cool idea that museum is using this tool for. Some other ideas, taking these maps, kind of deducing it down to where the student and the community lives and who will be impacted. I did this one for St. Petersburg. That's where I live. When I spoke to the Rotary Club down here to kind of show them how they'll be impacted, and maybe what does this mean for the Rotary Club and the businesses and the communities that they serve. So you can go into the 3 different topics: extreme heat, energy, and security, and then have a conversation about what this means for your local community. Another idea that we were working with different nonprofits throughout the state was filming and interviewing, like, how are you personally impacted by climate change, increased heat, energy insecurity, storms and flooding? How are you personally? So getting involved in the interviewing process of adults or other students or their family members, or, what job positions are going to be impacted by extreme heat. A lot of times we think, oh, the people that are going to be impacted the most are our farmers. And yes, they're going to be impacted, but also our police officers are outside just as often. Our EMS workers and our firemen are also outside. Students who maybe play a summer sport, they're going to be impacted by extreme heat. People who are pregnant in the summer, you name it, you can kind of brainstorm a lot of different people that are impacted by these 3 areas or one area specifically. And kind of do like a fun, getting to know you interview type activity with the students. How is this impacting you? And maybe do a podcast or do a social media post or something like that, where you're just kind of getting a lot of, I think they call it a Twitter storm, where a lot of different people are weighing in on their impacts and showcasing it that way. So you could use this in an art project or in a videography project or something like that from these maps. And then another idea is just kind of talking about civil servant positions, civil service. How do you stay involved? Who do you contact if you have a thought about this or you have a feeling or opinion? What does it look like to attend a lobby night or to testify? These are all really unique and helpful ways to get involved locally, which I think is pretty cool. That could be used possibly in a government class. What are the local organizations? What does it mean to be a board member? How do you join a board? How do you volunteer? What does that look like? What are the different ways that you can volunteer? And how can you continue your education beyond the classroom and get involved in your community around this topic, if this topic is something that you're very passionate about? And then this, in case you guys would like to go to visit the mapping tool yourself, if you're not on your phone, you can use the QR code here and it will take you right to the site. It'll scroll a little bit differently on your phone, but I'm assuming a lot of high school students and maybe middle school students probably have cell phones, so they can kind of play with it on their cell phone, play around with it. And then that is the website, Florida's climatefuture.org. We created this, the Environmental Defense Fund, but we worked with probably about 13 other nonprofits and educational institutions throughout the state of Florida to put this together and really kind of promote it and talk about it last year. We will be bringing this to Tallahassee when session starts for STEM Day, so that the legislators can use those iPads, like I was sharing about earlier, where they can touch on things, they can zoom in and see, oh, well, this is where I live and this is what this is going to look like for the community that I represent in the future. And then there is my contact information in case you'd like to connect or discuss this further. So that, I will go back to the main page and leave it on that, is my spiel about this, our Florida climate mapping tool. And I will stop sharing for a second so I can see everybody. Okay. Well, thank you so much for letting me share that. And if you guys have any questions, I would love to help answer them.
Yeah, let me see if any, let's see, we got Bill I can see, but everybody else is sort of off screen for the minute. But if anybody wants to raise, I've got several kinds of questions, but I want to ask if anybody has some questions before I ask him. I can see, Bill, you have a question or
Yes,
comment?
first of all, I'd like to say these are very nice looking presentation layers. My question has to do with, is there any other kind of layers that can come with this? Like, I know you have counties right now, but for example, MSAs or congressional districts, or are you
Yeah.
thinking about trying to create some layers that would be, I would say, politically interesting?
No, we likely won't. You know, this was already a pretty pricey endeavor to kind of get this going, but there are tons of resources out there. We kind of wanted it to be the simpler sample version of what else is out there. There's a ton of maps where actually the Environmental Defense Fund has a map called the Climate Vulnerability Index, CVI, that you can go layer by layer by layer. You can look at, you know, how many people over the age of 65 live in here, and you can see that map layer, and how many hospitals are in that area, and how many children under the age of 18. And you can kind of just keep layering those maps, and that is a lot of information. And that took years to put together, and I would love to share that one with you. So there are other mapping tools out there that do, you know, a ton of different, you know, information, and you can keep layering the on. For this one, we wanted it to be very simple. We wanted to show, hey, you're being impacted by climate change now, and here's kind of a simple tool and a simple model of it. But there are, you know, obviously way more detail layering models out there. For this one, we wanted it to be very, very simple.
So this is sort of an add-on question, is that one of my struggles is that um, the environmental textbooks that are used in high schools, well, first of all, it takes years to get one published, and then by the time they get published, the interactive mapping world is moving much faster than the textbook authors. So I end up with textbooks that has some, I'd say, not even relevant mapping sites. They seldom they seldom go to a mapping site, and if they go to one, it's got, you know, mold on it. And I'm saying, so one of the needs I have as a teacher is, you know, if someone would take a look at all the textbooks that they're using in environmental science in high schools and sort of make a cheat sheet to that say, here are the mapping sites by topical, you know, subject areas, so that the students can quickly get to those sites as they read through their chapters, because their basic teachers don't have time to do this.
Yeah.
So sort of that's what I'm sort of doing now in the classroom to keep it moving forward, is trying to find and cherry pick the best websites to get them to the most information. It's sort of like I'm not trying to teach them anything about GIS. I'm using GIS as a technique to get them to the material, and because they're very intrigued by the interactive aspects of these mapping programs, right? So I'm sort of saying this is it's a project that I've sort of started, and I'm looking for advocates who recognize that this is a problem of just pointing out the subject area websites, interactive websites that talk about the subjects that match the textbooks. I
Yeah,
mean,
no,
textbooks do a great story of telling the environmental scientist story, right? Like Chesapeake Bay. But there's probably no less than a dozen very nice interactive websites by various federal agencies, various departments of agencies that are better than others, right? So
yeah.
sort of trying to figure out that lay of the land.
Yeah, I know that climate vulnerability index, that might be a really fun one. When this methane tracker, I mean, the satellite is out, but when they start publishing in real time the live data, like, oh, wow, Louisiana has 40, you can see the plume of the methane being released, and you know there's a well here, you can see that it came from this one. So that the methane tracker will be a pretty fun one. I don't work super in depth with storms and flooding, but I know that there's a lot of real time mapping and data on rain patterns and increased rain and flooding and things like that. Where we have the trackers out in the ocean and out on land that kind of can show you some of those weather patterns and things like that. But yeah, I hear you. I feel like, yes, once you get the book published, it's already outdated and it's time to re-up with the next one. So that makes sense. That is an issue that you're running into.
So one of the things I'd like to do, since I have your email address, is to send you the index to the chapters of the textbook I'm using, and you go look at the chapters you're most interested in, energy, climate, so forth, or I'll circle them for you and say, okay, in these three areas, what are some of the most attractive? I mean, what have you got, and what do
Yeah.
you know other people? That'd be very useful as a tool for teachers,
Yeah,
or
no,
as in my
absolutely.
case, as
I can't go to Tallahassee and talk about policy and use something that happened 10 years ago.
right.
It wouldn't work. So I totally understand. Like I need to use what happened last month. What did we see last year? Yes, so I totally understand. Current data is what works and what sells and will get people excited about it. Yes.
And I guess you got, some of the sites that you were showing, the maps that you're showing, actually, you have references to those and where you got the data. So some of those, I know I thought I saw Climate Central as one of the citations there. So there are some sites there that are referenced in the maps themselves that probably Bill would have some links that would be good for you there.
Yep, absolutely. And again, this is data from 2023. We launched this in the beginning of 2024, this whole mapping tool. So everything would be current as of 2023. And then I imagine if you really like to map or you wanted to know, hey, did this change since last summer? What did 2024 the summer look like? Those same sites will likely have the updated data on their sites.
I know this just a comment. I noticed on a lot of interactive mapping sites now, you can actually subscribe to the data stream. And that's sort of like, I mean, it's sort of accelerating the whole process. So you
Yeah.
subscribe to it, and every time you turn it on, whatever's in that pipeline is moving toward that map. It's kind of
Yeah.
interesting.
With a lot of the data, I had to send the Excel spreadsheet to the graphic artist who then put that, okay, well, then Miami should be blue and it should be darker blue than this area. So yeah, he was using raw data. If the map it didn't already exist, but we wanted it to be colorful and we wanted it to be something that was visually useful and easy. That's what we were doing, was sending the raw data to the graphic designer to then put it in a map.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I think Barbara had her hand up. I don't know if she's,
Yes.
go ahead.
Hi. Sorry about that. This was really interesting. I run a nonprofit down in the whole South Florida area, so we're always looking for tools that we could use with our students. But I just had one question related specifically to how it connects to things like the EJ screening tool when we look at certain environmental justice layers, and is that something that you would have us go to another site to look at, or is it there's something that you guys are doing related to like tree canopy assessments that counties are doing as a whole? So just wanted to know a little bit more about like future plans and where the data connects, and then I'll be reaching out to you for sure.
Let me share my screen again. Share, view, slideshow. So take energy and security, for example. So it doesn't have the EJ layer on it. That climate vulnerability index does have a layer where you can click on EJ and you can click on a bunch of different topics within EJ, depending on what you're looking for. If you're looking for how many neonatal care units are in the middle of the state, that will pop out in the climate vulnerability index that EDF created. Again, this one is a very more simple one. So you would kind of just have to know, like, oh, okay, this area up here is more rural. And what we know about rural areas is they don't typically have, a ton of infrastructure for charging. So what does that mean on the EJ scale? Are they being left behind? Or if this area down here in Broward County, is experiencing X amount, we'll look at the extreme heat, actually, that would probably be a good one. Collier County, okay, well, maybe our students or maybe our community, we already know that, I'm giving this as an example, Monroe or Collier County are already an EJ community that is being left behind. Wow, they're gonna have a lot more temperature days of extreme heat and heat index. So it's not a layer on here. This one is more, again, just by the county. But if you know an area that you want to look at, this area compared to this area, this is a more privileged area, this is a more economically disadvantaged area or historically disadvantaged area, you can kind of look at it this way and use it like that. But we don't have an exact layer for it in this mapping tool. Does that help?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Barbara, just to follow up on your question, and this is where the teacher creativity comes in, I think. When I look at the tool, you've got kind of snapshots here, right, for these different maps. And so unlike, some of the GIS tools that you can't then sort of add a layer on top of it. But this might stimulate that initial question that you say, okay, well, if I've got a GIS class, then I can sort of take some of this information or find where this information is derived from here. Like in this University of Miami, I can get that. And then maybe I get the demographic information about, economic status and drill down to ask to kind of push that question to see if I can get an answer, right? I can do some of those analyses out of that. So, Barbara, do you have some thoughts about how out of the maps that you had seen, what kind of questions would you want to ask?
I mean, I definitely, Miami-Dade County is really focused on the extreme heat. So this extreme heat map that's on there is great. I know that working with the county, they have this specific a memorandum of understanding with the Miami-Dade County Public Schools related to increasing tree canopy in the schools. So I could see using, this tool to have kind of like a comparative analysis to what's happening in Miami-Dade County versus, Broward County, versus Palm Beach County, which is the 3 counties we serve with our program, and having students create, that advocacy piece by looking at what the county's policies are as compared to where the needs are in these maps. And have them do, like letters to their government officials at the high school level. So I can see us creating something like that.
Yeah, it seemed to me that you probably would need to drill down a little bit really closer within the county, and so you can pull out some of those areas. Like I'm thinking, okay, maybe Coral Gables has got a different temperature profile than Coconut Grove or something, and so can I get data at that level where I can take a look at that and think about what are the factors, it's not only economics, but of course the actual canopy itself is sort of factoring into the temperature there. So yeah, so thinking, so we have to do a little little thinking about how to set that up in a way so we have the right kind of data to help answer some of those questions. It's going to be a good one. So, Allie, yeah, thank you for posting that website where you've got the climate vulnerability index on there. That'll be really helpful.
Yeah, this one, the climate vulnerability index, I will share my screen and I will show you
Okay.
How layered it is, because this one you can look like we were looking, for example, I wanted to make the case policy wise, why Tampa Port, the Port of Tampa needed to start looking at shore power for their cruise ships and start electrifying some of their fleets. So I was able to zoom in and you can see how much smaller it is. The little chunks are way smaller. And you can look on this one. I'm not able to click around, and I'm by no means an expert on this one because it's been very, very detailed. But you can click on, okay, I want to look at infrastructure and the different topic areas. I want transportation, and I want, cost of climate. I want, chronic diseases and transportation. I want to see the map tool that kind of dives into this. So this is, again, very, very detailed, but you can kind of see where it stands in the country, in the nation, in the state. You can get really, really specific on this if that's what you want to be focusing on. And then you can think, okay, well, who lives over there? Is it mainly blacktop? Is it mainly agriculture? What's the soil like? What's the flood like? Do we know who lives there? Demographics. You can get very, very detailed in this one. So I definitely use this one for that more minute detail if you're looking for that. And then the other one, if it's more general, county specific is fine. We use this again when we're working with policymakers. I'm sorry, we use the Florida Climate Futures map. Hey, wow, look how your county ranks compared to this county over here in extreme heat. Why do you think that is, and what can be done about it? And then this one that I'm showing now is obviously way more detailed. And it's pretty fun to play around with. You can kind of glean anything from it and put different cases and scenarios up against themselves and see where you rank in the state. But I'm not an expert on this one, but it is a great tool if you want to get really down into the scale of things.
Gene or Marty, do you have a question or comment?
No, not particularly about the topic we're talking about. I have some questions I might write to her about individually.
Okay. Let me go back to Ellie. You were talking a little bit about that video possible project, and I'm kind of trying to think a little bit about that and how, if I was teaching like let's say a fifth or sixth grade middle school class, and I wanted kids to make a video about some of let's say about heat and flooding. How would, we can do a little just a brainstorming here. How would I use those maps to introduce the topic and ask them to make a video? You have some thoughts about that? Anybody?
Let's go to flooding. Oops. I mean, it could be, so I get this, oops, sorry. Are you still able to see the?
Yeah. How would you introduce that to a middle school student using this map?
I mean, you could say what looks different. You have lighter colors. What does that mean? You have darker colors. What does that mean? Oops. What are you noticing that's different? What do you know about those areas that are different? Do you know anybody that lives in those areas? Can you interview somebody that lives in those areas? Have they noticed anybody if they're older than you? Like maybe talking to a grandfather or grandmother, like, you lived in this area your whole life. Have you noticed this? Does this map look accurate to you? Do you know that your area floods more than this area over there? Just kind of get the wheels turning. And then with that, every kids love social media. Everybody loves social media. Making the videos like, why does this matter? And who does this matter to? And what do you think it's going to look like in 10 years? What would you do differently, or what would you ask differently? So kind of, I think that a tool like this, I think, can be used in a math class, in a science class, in a videography class. I think, you can take environmental, and you guys already know this, so I'm preaching to the choir. You can take environmental topics and plant them into all of your different topics, school subjects, and do deep dives using tools like this in a bunch of different ways. Maybe research this area. What did it used to look like 40 years ago? Can you find a picture of it? Did it have as many buildings as it has now? Did it have, infrastructure right all the way up to the water line? Was there development? Were people living there? And who lived there 100 years ago, and what did it look like? So I think in a bunch of different ways, it could be used across subject areas.
Bill, what kind of problems do the students have with a map? Do they know that's Florida? I guess that's one of my questions. And what age do they know something like that is Florida? They've never even maybe seen the counties divisions before. What kind of difficulties do you see with students with maps?
A lot. This is Bill.
So how would you overcome some of those problems in introducing an activity like that?
Well, the first thing I would say is introduce geography a lot earlier in their school programs. So I get a lot of juniors and seniors. You would think it's the first time they studied a map. I mean, they're familiar with the interactive mapping, but they have no sense of what I call classical geography. So some of those concepts that we use in geography are very foreign. They sort of take it for granted. What I've discovered to help them a little bit is I take them to parcel mapping sites where they can find their own houses and their own property lines and their neighbors' property lines, as sort of to lift the blanket off this thing, because they're not being well prepared in geography. I'm not a geographer, but I'm just saying my recognition is, my observation is that we bring them along pretty fast, and then suddenly we hit them with a lot of these maps, and they're struggling over not just the context of those maps, but the content of it.
Okay.
Like they'll ask me, like, well, what makes up a congressional district? What do you mean a census tract? And so a lot of times I have to back up and start to actually teach more about basic geography. So I would say just jumping into the map doesn't always solve the problem. It does satisfy some curiosity, but then they want to compare it to other things. So they may want to, their problem is they don't even know the counties that may be surrounding them. So you have to sort of help them. And we're talking about juniors and seniors.
Sure.
I mean, I would
put that
say,
map back, put any of the maps back on. Let me think about that when Bill is saying here about, so if I'm, I'm in Broward County here in Pembroke Pine. So a lot of students, I guess one of my questions for Bill is, you find that the juniors and seniors can they locate Broward County? Or you need that as a separate lesson, or pretty much do we assume that all the students at this point,
yeah,
that they're
I
juniors
no
and seniors?
longer assume they'll know where that county is. I mean, they struggle when I say find Central Florida. So I have to teach them that they need to look for a cluster of lakes that are in Central Florida, right? And use that as a surrogate way to get them to where they need to be. Probably the most useful interactive mapping sites is where they're allowed to put in their street address, and the map initially takes them right to that place.
Right.
And then they start to move the extent outward to see what's around it. So,
Okay. Zooming in and out is
right.
an opportunity just to give them some sense of how that relates to where they live. All right.
I
So
know it
some,
sounds so crazy. I spend a lot of time, as I say, I have a word for it now. I teach a lot of the tools that are around the margins because while there's a lot of tools there and some of them are should be pretty straightforward, some of these maps get really complicated. And you almost have to be the person who created these things to know what all these tools will do around the edges. I like what you got here because there's not too many tools. There's some big icons they can touch that take them in different directions. A lot of
yeah,
use of graphics, but this is also a very expensive approach. I
say
mean,
that again, expensive?
well, yeah, these are high quality graphics here.
Okay.
So most of these interactive sites are using what I call a stable of basic, GIS kind of tools, right? So, and a lot of the ramps, the color ramps on interactive mapping are pretty bad. Where you have an artist here involved, these are striking because they pop right out at you. But a lot in the interactive maps that we see on the web aren't that clear. So anyway, that's just another. I mean, I think over time these will get better.
Okay.
Everybody's maps will get better. But I was just commenting on being concerned about what the tools are around your margin. Don't have too many, but have the ones that help people really learn a little bit more about what these tools are doing and why this tool is there.
Right. Right. So it sounds from what you're describing, sort of thinking teachers will need to think carefully a bit about how they introduce these maps to students and what their prior knowledge is that they're bringing to the table about maybe do some lessons leading up to the use of these kinds of maps. I
Yeah,
mean,
I haven't really played with this one. I'm look forward to do that. But for example, I find I need to put a lot of city names on maps now because they do know where these major cities are, and that's sort of like I know it's a lot of eye candy, but that gets them to the the lights come on when they see the
okay,
city name and then they see a county name.
okay. Um, okay, very good. Well, I think I I do want to sort of, Allie, I want to point one thing out for you just to consider, and this is the future sea level rise. You have that slide with that inset map. I was telling Allie before we started today, thank you. Um, that I got some feedback from someone today about he had some concerns about this particular map, and I just wanted to point that out and make sure that you're aware of that. This is an interesting map in that, you've got a couple things going on here. One is you see what happens if it's 2 degrees or 4 degrees Celsius rise in temperature, you got the flooding, from the two different scenarios here. And the darker scenario is, well, it's a little confusing. I guess that's additional flooding up here in the lighter color that'll happen when you get 4 degrees. This will be flooded down in South Florida. All the Everglades will disappear under the ocean. Um, but I guess the concern that he had was that it was at least in a near term, that there was only kind of a 1 foot estimate going on. And then this extreme flooding that is showing here is really for next century, as it points out here, and maybe beyond that. 4 feet will provide that kind of flooding, but it's really not so much near term. It's really down the road. The big estimates they've got, I think, are not quite as extreme for the next 50 years or so. So I think he
Yeah,
was
I think
concerned about that.
yeah, 2100 is a far a ways away.
Yeah.
Again, a lot of this, I mean, if you were to go to the source and kind of dig in deeper, you would see like, does this map mean that the water is there all the time? Now it is permanently under? Is this just during the summer months? Like, there's more questions to be asked. This is just kind of simplified, hey, by 2100, this is what it would look like based on data from Climate Central. But I'm sure if you went through Climate Central's website, you can see there, maybe this is just during flooding season. Maybe it's 3 feet in July or in July and less in January. And yeah, I mean, this is, to be honest, a map that we would love to have better data on that is, within the next 10, 15, 20 years. And might be under the standard of if we do nothing as well. So really just kind of, this is to present an idea of the data that is out there, at least for this map. And you can go and find more information and dig in, like, what does that mean next year, 10 years from now, et cetera. And is this under a do nothing scenario, or is this under a we did a little bit? What does the infrastructure look like? What changes have been made? So there's not going to be a tool that's perfect in any ways, but just kind of showcasing what is estimated by data.
Yeah, I guess he was expressing a concern that this was somewhat confusing. You got one part that shows, 2100, you got a foot, which is not going to show any of these scenarios here. But, the 2 or 4 degree scenario might be later than just 2100. So, anyway, there's a question he raised about accuracy and that sort of thing. I think
Yeah.
probably should be taken into account. But anyway, okay.
I have another question about this particular issue. How does this contrast or compare to the material that the Center for Landscape Conservation Planning at UF puts out? I think they do it in cooperation with 1,000 Friends.
Right.
Yeah.
That's where you get the 1,000 Friends.
Where they put
Allie,
out sea level.
their research at all?
No, did you say the Urban Land Institute? Who is this?
It's the University of Florida, the Center for Landscape Conservation Planning. They actually do it. What their source of their data, Allie, is the European Space Agency puts out that Sentinel-2, the 10-meter land use cover data layer. So it's the one that they're producing maps on sprawl in Florida. And so they show the amount of developed space, protected space, and sea level rise. And they have some maps they've put out that go out to like sea level 2070. I was just kind of curious as to, I'm sure, I mean, this is a pretty big data set, the Sentinel-2 10-meter layer.
Yeah, no, if you have that, I mean, we could definitely take a look at it and see if, if we swap out the map, if it's more minute, gets right down to the, more accuracy level, and possibly swap out the maps. Again, this is from 2023. If we update this in the future, we will be looking at, okay, did we like Climate Central's indicator map, or did we want to swap it out for something that's more accurate and better? And then again, like we talked about at the beginning of the show, the constant new data coming out every year.
Correct.
Okay. Before we've got about 5 minutes left, I wanted to check if Allie, you and I talked a little bit about some of your other projects that you work on, your electric vehicle and school buses and that sort of thing. And I don't know if you wanted to mention that and see if I guess it's Bill and Bill's. So you're the one that's left here, so we're going to check with you, I guess, about this question, whether you guys have some electric school buses in Mount Dora.
Gosh, good question. I don't know.
What county are you in?
Lake County.
I don't believe. No, we have Jefferson, Lafayette, Dixie, Columbia, Duval, Orange, Pinellas, Hillsborough, Manatee, Sarasota, Glades, Palm Beach, Broward, and Miami-Dade all either have electric school buses or will be getting them, and they've committed to it and they've secured the funding for it. So those are the districts already in the state of Florida that have electric school buses. And I'm sharing my screen. I think, can you guys see my screen? Yes, okay. Clean school bus program, just a really short pitch. So this is the 4th round of electric school bus funding put out by the EPA under the IRA or the Inflation Reduction Act, or the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, those huge sweeping federal climate funding funds that are available. We are now in the 4th round. So if it's something that you are interested in, you can go to Clean School Bus. I just type in Clean School Bus Program. It's open now, and applications are being collected until January 9th of 2025. It looks like there's almost $1 billion of funding to purchase electric school buses. It's the electric school bus and it's the charging infrastructure. School districts, I believe, for this one can get up to the amount of 25 school buses. You have to retire a school bus that meets the retirement requirements, which is usually needs to be 12 to 15 years old. It needs to be diesel, and you are going to be retiring that old diesel school bus, and replacing it with this electric school bus. And they will give you the funding once I think you have to put in the purchase order and send the receipt, and then they will pay for it. So there's a ton of information on here. This is my other hat that I wear, is to get either school districts to apply for this funding. There's also a ton of funding for trash trucks, transit buses, other large vehicles that are running on diesel. There's like 5% of them are on the road, but they are about a quarter of all of the greenhouse gas emissions. So if we get the medium and heavy duty vehicles to transition over, we will be sitting pretty. So that's kind of the other big push that I work on. When you click here, you can see who else has won in the past. The other programs, who the winners are. One thing that you definitely want to look at when you're looking at this are the priority school districts, which let me see if I can quickly find them. Maybe not. They're usually on this page, but it will say, you can see, third party, who's able to apply. It's pretty much every school district in the state. I think it's might not allow private school districts, or private schools to apply. But pretty much anybody that wants to apply can. These are, the replacements. Looks like 2010 or 2011 is what you would be retiring. They go through kind of everything on here, but I would take a look at this website and look for priority school districts, because that will say, hey, if you're in a priority school district, that is a good place to be, because you'll already get X amount of points and jump to the top of the line, or top of the in front of everybody else. And then they'll go through and say, okay, you're getting it, you're not getting it. You can have 5, you can have 20, that kind of thing. And then I have a lot of connections, if this is something that you're interested in, connections with electric school bus fleets, manufacturers, other people who have already done this and had successes, and they can share their stories. And then there's some really cool private and public partnerships that are available, so that it becomes a win for everybody, with the infrastructure and the buses. And then we were talking at the very beginning of the hour about how these can be used as battery backup. Just with Hurricane Milton and Helene, people were reusing their electric trucks, their F-150s, their light duty trucks, not a heavy duty bus, but a truck. When their power went out, the refrigerator was running, their CPAPs were being charged. There was a veterinarian who was able to keep her veterinarian place open, and was able to keep working through the storms and the days after the storms, saving, different animals' lives and still working. So these, the battery backup power is real with this. And so that's another thing. And I know some school districts are using the buses in the summer to be charged overnight and then power the grid during the day. And they're actually making money as that battery backup with their utilities. I think in Delaware, they're getting like $10,000 just in the summer months when the buses are just sitting there being used as that battery. So I could talk about that for a long time, but that is just something else that I wear the other hat, which is really promoting the electric vehicle adoption for larger vehicles out there. And school buses in the United States are the largest fleet that we see in the United States are school buses.
Allie, how did they decide the priority? What was the criteria to be a priority county
Yeah, so and it's not
district?
even just district, it's not even just county. It's, economic data. It is, tribal data, it is air pollution data. So there's a number of things that will get you on that priority list. If you're rural, that kind of thing. And then they also allow you to self-certify. So if you for some reason aren't on that list, but you're like, hey, I really should be, then you're able to kind of pitch your reasoning. The first round, they said Miami-Dade not a priority because of economic data, and then they were looking at it a little bit later, and they said, well, actually, this area over here has a ton of money, and the demographic over here it has a ton less money. So this area shouldn't be lumped in with everybody and all the students, because even though it is all in the county, the districts are different. And then they pulled it apart and kind of went in there with a more of a fine-tooth comb. So there's a ton of different ways that they were able to prioritize the school districts. And then you can also pitch your reasoning to be on that priority list if you don't see your name on that list.
Great, thank you.
Yes.
Do you have any great stories where students in a school did some sort of project with your data and encouraged a school district to get interested in this program?
Yeah, not me personally, but is it Michelle Drucker, who is a powerhouse over in the Miami area? She worked with a green team at a high school. The high schoolers were very passionate about this, maybe even middle schoolers. They went to their school board, they went to their PTA meetings, they pitched it, they stood behind it, they asked for it, and now they have electric school buses. There are other schools that have done something similar in the Tampa area around solar power powering their schools, and it went through. So yes, definitely getting the students involved, I think, is a great idea. And then it really gives them that taste of advocacy, ownership, community engagement, all the different pieces to then.
So if I write you a note, you'll give me a reference over to that lady?
Yes, I will. Absolutely. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
That's great.
Great to hear that. Well, thank you, Ally, with this wonderful presentation. So, and I love the add-on at the end here about the EV stuff. So obviously we got some folks interested, and as Bill suggests, maybe there's some room, and your stories suggest that as well, about student advocacy for these kinds of for the EVs and their districts, and yeah, why not? So thank you for that information. So I'm going to stop the recording here.